Alrighty, folks, two terrible shootings over the weekend by Iraq War veterans. We'll get into all the details. Plus, the New York Times unleashes on Charlie Kirk. They've brought forth two of their most annoying and storied writers to do all of this. Plus, we'll get to some foreign policy, government shutdown, all the rest. First, when the left attacks, the answer is not silence. The answer is not to retreat. It isn't to do less. The answer is to show up everywhere and make our voices louder than ever, to push out more content, more truth, more breaking news, more investigative journalism. We have to fight harder than we ever have before. And that's what we're doing at the Daily Wire. This October, Daily Wire Plus members are getting more new films, more new series, more new documentaries, and more of everything you expect from us. Join now, get it all with 40% off new Daily Wire Plus annual memberships. This is where the fight actually happens, and now is the time to join. Unfortunately, over the weekend, a spate of mass shootings that has plagued the nation continues. According to the Wall Street Journal, a shooter left 4 people dead and several people injured at a church about 50 miles north of Detroit. On Sunday, according to the police, hundreds of people were at a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints service, that is the Mormon temple, when a man drove through the front doors, got out of the vehicle, began firing with a rifle at 10:25 a.m. local time in Grand Blanc, Michigan, according to the township police chief. Photos from the scene showed a silver truck flying 2 American flags that had rammed into the church. Apparently, the gunman then set the church on fire using gasoline as an accelerant. When people attempted to respond, he then began shooting. The suspect is 40 years old. He is a former member of the Marine Corps. Apparently, he served from 2004 to 2008 and deployed to Iraq in 2007 and 2008. He retired as a sergeant. He was married. He had a young son. It is unclear what exactly the motive was. At this time, it appears to be linked, presumably, to mental illness. President Trump did say in a social media post this appeared to be yet another targeted attack on Christians. But again, we are sort of waiting for more details on the shooter at this point. According to the New York Post, the shooter had some personal issues, as you would imagine. Apparently, there were hundreds of worshipers inside the church when the attack began. Aerial footage showed an enormous plume of choking black smoke rising up from the structure as it burned. Apparently, this man, his wife, they had a now 10-year-old son who was born with congenital hyperinsulinism, or CHI, a rare genetic condition where the pancreas releases too much insulin. And again, apparently, there are people who knew the shooter and had suggested that he was suffering from some sort of unwellness. Unfortunately, this was not the only incident of mass shooting by a veteran over the weekend. Apparently, there was a shooting in North Carolina as well. According to the New York Post, the madman who targeted a crowded dockside restaurant in a highly premeditated mass shooting in North Carolina is a Purple Heart recipient and heavily decorated Marine who served in Iraq before changing his name and filing a slew of conspiracy-laden lawsuits, according to authorities and records. The shooter was arrested Saturday night after launching a deadly assault on the American Fish Company restaurant in Southport Yacht Basin. He apparently suddenly sprayed bullets into a crowd of unsuspecting diners. This person was known to the community. He had filed a bunch of bizarre lawsuits, including one where he accused a church of trying to kill him. He claimed that church was, quote, behind a civil conspiracy masterminded by the LGBT community and white supremacist pedophiles to kill him because he was, quote unquote, a straight man. Obviously, that lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice because it was based on legitimately nothing. Apparently, he said he had been wounded in 2 separate IED attacks during a 2006 tour in Iraq, as well as a bullet wound that left shrapnel lodged in his head. And it is confirmed that this person also served in the Marines from 2003 to 2009 and deployed to Iraq in 2005, and then again in 2006, winning a slew of medals. So, what does all of this mean? Well, it certainly means that people who are suffering from mental illness in the country, as per our usual arrangement with mass shootings, are not getting the help that they need. It means that people around them are not doing what they can to ensure that they are involuntarily committed if they are dangerous to themselves and others. You know, when we look at the circumstances around every shooting, we ought to look, obviously, at the motives, because not every shooting is the same. The assassin who killed Charlie Kirk is not the same as the mass shooter at this Mormon church in Michigan. And pretending that all shootings are happening for the same reason would be to ignore a panoply of causes, all of which we need to address. When it comes to mental illness, the big cause that we have to address is simply allowing people who obviously have symptomatic mental illness, who clearly are dangerous to other people, to simply walk the streets without any sort of serious consequence or any capacity to rein them in. And that's something that's going to have to be handled on the local, state, and federal level. I've been calling for a very long time for additional funding for psychiatric hospitals. Involuntary commitment rules that need to be loosened. Too many of these incidents are happening every single day. Now, speaking more broadly of crime, it is true that there is a wing in American politics that is significantly more tolerant of crime, whether it comes from the mentally ill or whether it comes just generally, because they believe that that is a result of some deep embedded cruelty in American society. This has resulted in spikes in left-wing crime, unfortunately. According to Axios, we are now seeing left-wing terrorism outpacing far-right attacks for the first time in 30 years. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, halfway through 2025, attacks by far-left extremists outpaced far-right violence for the first time in more than 3 decades. CSIS researchers compiled and analyzed a dataset of 750 domestic attacks and plots from January 1st, 1994 to July 4th, 2025, categorizing them into right, left, jihadist, ethno-nationalist, and other. The data showed that left-wing extremists have carried out 41 attacks since 2016, compared with 152 from the far right over that same period. Which means that this is not one of those studies that tends to be right skewing in the first place. It tended to be left skewing in the first place. However, since the beginning of this year, there have been at least 5 left-wing plots or attacks, compared to just 1 right-wing attack. So something is changing. Something is changing. The permission structures that exist, and they do exist on both sides of the aisle for a wide variety of crimes that range from kind of the simply criminal, from riots, acts of violence, to actual terrorism. Those permission structures are now skewing to the left, and we saw that over the weekend as well. Already coming up, the New York Times has decided it's been long enough. It's time to go after Charlie Kirk. Plus, they're praising Marjorie Taylor Greene. What did she do to earn that praise? I think you might be able to guess. We'll get to that in a moment. First, when inflation jumps, when you hear the national debt is over $37 trillion, do you ever think maybe now would be a good time to buy some gold? I thought that, and so I actually did. I bought some more gold recently, whether to protect against the dollar's loss in purchasing power, for peace of mind during global instability, or just for sensible diversification. Birch Gold Group believes every American should own physical gold. And so along with the Daily Wire, Birch Gold created something special this month. Through September 30th, if you buy from Birch Gold, you will get a signed copy of my brand new book, Lions and Scavengers, plus your very own Golden Ben Shapiro bookmark. It's actually a beautiful bookmark. We released an extremely limited quantity of the autographed books and bookmarks, so text Ben to 989898 to claim your eligibility and start the process. Plus, Birch Gold can help you roll an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold. You're still eligible for that signed copy of Lions and Scavengers. I buy my gold from Birch Gold, so do tens of thousands of other Lions. Is now finally the time for you to do it. It's really easy. You give them a call, they walk you through the process, and then when you're done, you got a bunch of gold in your safe. That's what happened to me. Text my name, Ben, to 989898. Claim your eligibility today. Act before September 30th. Again, text Ben to 989898. Also, do you guys ever read protein bar labels and you feel like you're reading ingredients to a candy bar? A lot of health bars are actually packed with those unnecessary sugars and chemicals. My team and I have tried a bunch of different bars that either taste like trash or left you hungry again within the hour. Luckily, my team found Equip Foods Prime Bars, the first of its kind grass-fed beef protein bar with only real food ingredients and absolutely nothing to hide, with 20 grams of clean protein. Starting today, my listeners receive an exclusive discount on Equip's Prime Bar. Has become the team's favorite protein bar on the market, with 20 grams of protein in every bar. It's a heavy protein bar, made with just 11 clean ingredients like collagen and colostrum. These bars deliver 20 grams of grass-fed beef protein without that bloat. They're free from whey, seed oils, and artificial additives. Plus, they're naturally sweetened with dates and honey, so they taste like dessert without the guilt. Producer Justin, he's been using these things. He's trying to bulk up a little bit, get more protein in the diet. It's working for him. Whenever he's on the road, he is chowing down on one of these bars. If you want to try the cleanest protein bar on the market that already sold out once, go to equipfoods.com/Ben Shapiro and use code Ben Shapiro at checkout to get 25% off one-time purchases or 40% off your first subscription order for a limited time. That's equipfoods.com/Ben Shapiro and use code Ben Shapiro at checkout. Apparently, protesters clashed with ICE agents again, this time in Portland. According to the New York Post, federal agents began arriving in war-ravaged Portland, Oregon over the weekend after President Trump ordered military deployment to the city, with at least one clash already erupting outside an ICE facility. One ICE officer was seen Friday shoving a protester to the ground. Another demonstrator was detained as agents confronted crowds outside the South Portland site. And it's Portland, which means that they're dressed up as cartoon characters. The video itself is bizarre. You have people who are dressed up in what appear to be Pokemon outfits, people who are wearing American flags and onesie PJs. It's Portland. You know, delightful people. You have one protester who apparently is dressed up as some sort of strange Bob Dylan knockoff wearing a rainbow lanyard and a sign that says F off feds with the peace sign. President Trump immediately deployed troops to Portland. These people showed up in response to those troops being deployed to Portland to protect the ICE agents, of course. That did not stop the Oregon governor from bashing President Trump. Again, Democrats, they're significantly more bothered by National Guard showing up to protect ICE agents doing their job than they are by actual crime. Here is the governor of Oregon.
There is no insurrection. There is no threat to national security, and there is no need for military troops in our major city. Military service members should be dedicated to real emergencies. The members of the Oregon National Guard, their mission is to stand up and protect Oregonians, and they will do that every day, but they are not needed in the city. They are not needed here.
It is very strange how many Democratic governors do not understand how this works. All they have to do is protect the ICE agents doing their job and ensure those ICE agents can do their job, and then there won't be federal troops in their cities. But they simply refuse to do this over and over and over again. They refuse to do this. President Trump, of course, has bragged about how he was going to do this in Portland, in Chicago as well. He said in a post on Truth Social Saturday he was ordering Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to use the military to protect ICE facilities, which he said were under siege from attack by Antifa. He said he's also authorizing full force if necessary. Apparently, soldiers are going to be deployed to Memphis, Tennessee as well. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee has suggested that he is totally fine with that. Again, I think it's a very smart move by President Trump to go out of his way to deploy in red states, because red state governors are totally fine with lowering crimes in blue cities in their own states. They see that as a win-win. Meanwhile, apparently, troops are being deployed in Chicago as per President Trump's promise. According to The Hill, federal immigration agents patrolled downtown Chicago on Sunday as the Trump administration ramps up immigration crackdowns in major cities across the country. The Border Patrol agents spotted downtown were armed, masked, and camouflaged, according to News Nation. ICE said hundreds of ICE officers were downtown as part of its Midway Blitz operation in Chicago, which began on September 8th. And apparently they made multiple arrests downtown, including the River North neighborhood, on Sunday morning. Apparently 11 people were arrested outside an ICE detention facility in Broadview, Illinois, on Saturday because there was another large protest at the center. And, of course, the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, who must be lowered into the state capitol by crane, called the president's, quote, a show of intimidation. That, quote, is instilling fear in our communities and hurting our businesses. Yeah, nothing hurts business like having troops there to ensure that actually they can operate safely. If there's one thing businesses in Chicago are afraid of, it's the stopping of the crime. They need more crime in Chicago. They need more illegal immigrants on the streets in Chicago. That's what business owners are deeply worried about. The Democrats' willingness to embrace the 20 side of nearly every 80-20 issue is truly mind-boggling. It really is an impressive thing. And when it comes to that left-wing permission structure for violence, Democrats keep upping the ante over and over and over. So we've been talking about this since the shooting of Charlie Kirk. The left wing has created permission structures for violence. The argument goes like this. If you make a point that they disagree with, that is in fact a denial of their identity. It is in fact an act of implicit violence, and that act of implicit violence is to be met with actual violence. And so you will see Democrats using language like fascist with regard to Republicans on a routine basis. Not sort of colloquially, seriously. They apparently mean it. You'll see Democrats claiming day in and day out that there are brutal attacks going on black people in the country, attacks that can only be met, presumably, with force, and then openly praising people who have used terrorism in the past. Over the weekend, Representative Ayanna Pressley, the Ringo Starr of the squad, she's the congresswoman from Massachusetts, she said that President Trump's to-do list as president includes attacking black women. I mean, this is just, they're not lowering the rhetoric. All the talk about lowering the temperature, it's not going to happen here.
Rev, again, Donald Trump is attacking anyone and everyone except for the cost of groceries. He is working through this enemies list every day, prioritizing political retribution and grievance, and again, working an enemies list instead of a to-do list. I mean, his to-do list, I think, just says golf, attack black women, attack enemies, alienate our allies, and continue to create crushing hurt for working families, instead of what he should be doing, which is lowering cost for the American people and keeping his word.
So again, according to the left, President Trump just doesn't differ with them with regard to his political arguments. He actually wants to somehow harm black women. And by the way, Ayanna Pressley, I'm kind of tired of hearing Democrats talk about how much they abhor violence while they literally praise people who are murderers. Okay, Ayanna Pressley did that over the weekend. She openly praised Assata Shakur. Assata Shakur was a murderous terrorist. She died over the weekend. And the Chicago Teachers Union paid tribute to her. She died while she was living in Cuba because she was in exile since she was on the FBI's most wanted list, having escaped prison in 1979 after being convicted of the first-degree murder of a New Jersey state trooper. And that was after, of course, she had joined the so-called Black Liberation Army that engaged in a campaign of guerrilla activities against the United States government, ranging from bank holdups to murdering drug dealers and police. Here is Ayanna Pressley openly praising Assata Shakur.
I'm going to do a little call and response, one of my favorite in the words of Assata Shakur. So I will say it and you respond and repeat it back. It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love each other and support each other.
We must love each other and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
I mean, apparently you have your independence to lose as you speak like a robot, the words that Ayanna Pressley dictates to you while praising, a person who actively killed a member of American law enforcement. Pretty impressive stuff. Meanwhile, again, other major Democrats continue to trot out the exact same inflammatory language that's been carved into bullets. Now, remember that into the casing, the shell casing of one of the bullets that was going to be aimed at Charlie Kirk was the phrase, "Hey, fascist, catch." That's not stopping Democrats from continuing to use that sort of language. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, over the weekend, put out via his press office, "Stephen Miller is a fascist," all capital letters, because he's still doing this annoying routine where he pretends that he's like President Trump. And then Randi Weingarten, the head of the American Federation of Teachers, she says that actually it's her job to fight fascism. That's what she's doing. She's not fighting the American taxpayer on behalf of teachers who want to teach less and do a bad job with your children. She's actually fighting fascism.
What's clear to me is that people don't know what fascism is. They don't know what authoritarian is. So what they see is they think we're just being, or people, when they use a term, are just being political. We want critical thinking for not only adults, but for our kids. And what I wanted to do here is not only do a warning, but also what is the antidote? HBCUs are the antidote. Public education done well is the antidote. When teachers in classrooms are trying to create a safe and welcoming environment, that's the antidote to political violence. Let them have the resources and the supports to do those kind of things. Right. And what's the biggest antidote? Kids really understanding and discerning fact from fiction. Them understanding, as the founders asked us to do, to actually make education the foundation stone of this country.
So do the things that she wants, or you're a fascist. And if you don't do what she wants, then you're fomenting violence. It's these sorts of arguments that actually create the permission structures for violence, of course. And those permission structures find their apex at the New York Times. I have to say, the New York Times is such a horribly edited newspaper. And I say this advisedly. There are people at the New York Times with whom I politically disagree very strongly, but I like personally. Ezra Klein is one of those people. I recently did a very long interview with Ezra Klein. We sat down. We disagreed on nearly everything, but it was very conciliatory. It was really interesting. We held our positions, but it was sort of a fascinating clarification. The New York Times, however, has spent pretty much every day since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, with the exception of Ezra's work over there, really pushing that permission structure for violence. And over the weekend, they truly outdid themselves, really outdid themselves. In a minute, we'll get to more from the New York Times. Nicole Hannah-Jones makes her grand return to the pages of her alma mater. Plus, the New York Times is now praising Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we'll get to the latest talks regarding Gaza. We'll also get to the government shutdown. A lot going on in the news today. First, with the holidays just around the corner, companies are getting ready for their busiest time of the year by looking for all sorts of extra help. It's not just retail these days. You'll find businesses searching for people to work at winter festivals, wrap gifts, help with big events, manage deliveries, even step in as personal shoppers. There's a real need for anyone with handy skills, event experience, or special licenses, since these roles aren't always easy to fill when demand spikes. Whether you're hiring for one of those roles or any other role, the best way to find the perfect match for your role is on ZipRecruiter. Right now, you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. As a business owner, I can really appreciate how ZipRecruiter's technology quickly matches job postings with qualified candidates, so you're not wasting days sifting through the wrong applications. Plus, you can instantly see how many people in your area are actually qualified for a position. That helps you make hiring decisions a lot faster. You can even reach out to top candidates directly from their resume database, making the recruitment process smoother and more efficient. Let ZipRecruiter find the right people for your roles, seasonal or otherwise. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the very first day. And right now, you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. Also, I found that when it comes to updating your home, those details, they make all the difference. Maybe you thought about upgrading those window treatments, but it's kind of a hassle. Usually it just isn't worth it. All that waiting around for a designer, sky-high quote, then trying to coordinate installation, it's a pain in the butt. Well, that's why I want to tell you about Blinds.com. Blinds.com totally changed my outlook on home updates. Instead of waiting around for appointments, you can actually browse their huge selection, even talk to an expert from the comfort of your own home. If you want somebody to measure it and install it for you, they'll do it. Prefer to do it yourself? Well, you can do that too. They'll have expert support every step of the way. Their samples show up fast, free. Picking the perfect color or texture is simple. Whether you're looking for bamboo shades, classic shutters, or even outdoor options for the patio, they've got you covered, all for a price that beats the showroom every single time. Best part? No stress. Just a simple process with a 100% satisfaction guarantee from the folks who've been doing this for 29 years and have covered over 25 million windows. Right now, Blinds.com is giving our listeners an exclusive $50 off when you spend $500 or more. Just use promo code Shapiro at checkout. Limited time offer. Rules and restrictions apply. See Blinds.com for details. So, you just have to understand that the New York Times, as a newspaper, is perhaps the chief purveyor of this permission structure. Right after Charlie died, they had not one but 2 separate pieces concerning Hassan Piker, the Twitch streamer who is more than warm to terrorist violence. They had one piece that was an obit for Charlie by Hassan Piker, basically blaming capitalism for Charlie's death. And then they had a profile of Hassan Piker as though he was some sort of great exemplar of moral debate, anti-violent debate, which is insane. I mean, the man has, as we've covered on the show, over and over and over, endorsed the use of violence. In fact, here he wasn't all that long ago singing Bella Ciao. Bella Ciao is a revolutionary song that was literally carved again into one of the bullets that was next to the gun used to kill Charlie Kirk.
Partigiano, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.
He knows precisely what he's doing. First of all, can't sing, but also knows precisely what he's doing. He's not doing that for fun. He's doing that because there is a tacit and not so tacit endorsement of violence by members of the left. Well, over the weekend, the New York Times decided it was time. There'd been too much tolerance for opposing views in the New York Times. That had to stop. And so they called forth the Halley's Comet of stupidity. They appear upon the horizon once every few years. They emerge from their cozy sinecures, being paid much money to do virtually nothing. By the New York Times and by other elite publications, they trotted out Ta-Nehisi Coates. Any society that treats Ta-Nehisi Coates as a public intellectual is a society that truly deserves whatever happens to it, because Ta-Nehisi Coates is not only a purple writer, he is an awful thinker. So they tried out Ta-Nehisi Coates, and they also tried out Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is back from the intellectual dead. She hasn't written anything for years, but she's still on the New York Times' payroll. First, Ezra had on Ta-Nehisi Coates to essentially chide him for the great sin of being upset over Charlie's death. Ta-Nehisi Coates, who literally just wrote a book, essentially creating the case for why terrorists are fine against Israel, calling Israel an apartheid state, likening Israel to the Jim Crow South, not mentioning a single time Palestinian terrorism. Ta-Nehisi Coates, the same person who has over and over and over again made light of terrorism, including 9/11. He wrote in his book, Between the World and Me, about sitting on top of an apartment building, watching the towers as they burned and feeling nothing, stoned out of his mind. Ta-Nehisi Coates, a perfect person for the New York Times to bring in as a sort of voice of morality. And what was he upset about? He was upset that Ezra Klein had written a couple of columns in which he treated Charlie Kirk as a good example of people trying to debate issues. So, Ta-Nehisi put out this interview with Ezra Klein, and Ezra Klein says to him in the interview, quote, "After that happened, I thought about me, I thought about you, I thought about all kinds of people I know. So I do think there's something about when violence takes hold, there's something about it that begins to breach all lines. That's part of my reaction too." He said, "I worry that we are already in a cycle of political violence, of mimetic violence. I think about Nancy Pelosi, I think about Josh Shapiro, I think about the near assassination of Trump." Ta-Nehisi Coates' reply was, quote, "I think all of that is understandable, but was silence not an option? But was silence not an option?" So you're supposed to stay silent when a major political commentator on the other side of the aisle is shot to death while debating issues, according to Ta-Nehisi Coates, because he thought the wrong things. Because he thought the wrong things. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates just does his usual routine about how America is a deeply evil and racist place. And then he mischaracterizes Charlie's positions over and over and over again, calling Charlie a racist, lying about what Charlie had to say, and suggesting that Charlie made the debate worse. Ta-Nehisi Coates didn't make the debate worse by suggesting over and over and over that America was deeply racist, unfixable, terrible, so terrible he had to run out of the country, while simultaneously writing comic books for DC Comics. Now, it's Charlie who's really the problem, according to Ta-Nehisi Coates, the great morality police of the New York Times, who has to step in to make sure that Charlie Kirk is not in any way praised after his murder. Solid stuff there from Ta-Nehisi Coates. But that wasn't all. On the same day that happened, the New York Times printed a discovered essay by Nikole Hannah-Jones. I say discovered because, again, her essays only come out once every, at this point, 10 years. The 1619 Project was a long time ago. And she's a terrible example, again, of a public intellectual. She's a person who, when she was criticized for her historical inaccuracies in her awful project, the 1619 Project, which was a gigantic propaganda attempt by the New York Times to recast all of American history as the outgrowth of slavery. When she was criticized by actual historians, people who are not even of the right, people like Gordon Wood or Sean Weilance, she came out and basically said, well, they're all white, aren't they? She also bragged. People said that the riots that happened in 2020 could be called the 1619 riots, and she cheered that. She thought it was good. The permission structures for violence on the left are quite real, and they are quite pervasive. And her essay about Charlie is egregiously terrible. Quote, "The day Charlie Kirk was killed, Dominic Durant's 11-year-old daughter came home from her middle school in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and told her father that her friends had been very upset about his death, and that they felt she should be upset too. I'm sad," she said, tears in her eyes. Durant struggled how to respond. He too had been appalled by the act of violence, but his young daughter did not know much about Kirk, and he worried she would look him up on YouTube and come across the many ugly assertions the right-wing activist had made about black Americans like them. For instance, Kirk had claimed that 4 prominent and successful black women, who all went to Ivy League universities, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the former First Lady Michelle Obama, TV host Joyanne Reid, and former Representative Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, did not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously and had to go steal a white person's slot. He'd argued that black America is poorer, more murderous, more dangerous than when black people were living under Jim Crow. Durant did not want his daughter thinking that because her friends were grieving him, that the things Kirk had claimed were acceptable or right. Durant said, quote, I said it's natural to be sad. I don't want you to change your opinion about being sad, but I'm explaining to you that the gentleman who just got shot was under the impression that you, as a young black woman, don't have the brain processing power. So I'm explaining to you to let you know what he said was wrong and not true. Charlie never said that. He literally never said that. What Charlie said is that if you are an affirmative action admittee, the tacit admission there is that you couldn't make it without affirmative action points. And then he pointed out that Ketanji Brown Jackson was put in place for affirmative action reasons and has not exactly performed well on the Supreme Court, for example. But he never said anything like all black women don't have brain processing. That's ridiculous. Charlie would never say that and did never say that. But the entire piece by Nikole Hannah-Jones is just a complete mischaracterization of Charlie's positions in order to minimize the tragedy of his death. Quote, as a Christian, Durant also felt he had to address Kirk's version of Christianity, which condemned and disparaged people who are gay and transgender. Kirk once posted, the pride and trans movements have always been about grooming kids. Well, actually, if you read the entire tweet, here is what the actual tweet says. Quote, trans actor Elliot Page, formerly known as Ellen, explains that queer stuff is no longer niche because 30% of young people are now LGBTQ. The pride and trans movements have always been about grooming kids. They call it normalizing. They cannot procreate, so they recruit, and now they're bragging about it. Okay, that doesn't mean grooming kids isn't like to rape them. That is not what he's talking about. He means that there's a social contagion with regard to things like trans, which, by the way, is statistically true. This intolerance was not reflective of Durant's own understanding of Jesus or the gospel, nor the faith his family practiced. I reminded her not to be a hypocritical Christian, he said. I told her, you know, the good book, the Bible, says you judge man as he lived, not as he died. Well, I mean, put aside the fact that the anti-biblical explanation of sexuality that is put forth by the left truly does not accord with the words of either the Old Testament or the New Testament. Again, this entire piece is designed to mischaracterize Charlie's beliefs so as to suggest that the laments for Charlie are undeserved. That is the entire idea. She essentially tries to call Charlie a white supremacist. She quotes another left-wing activist to suggest that Kirk engaged in rhetoric of Christian white nationalism and that it has moved to the center of the Republican identity. This is what the New York Times is pushing. Again, that Charlie and all conservatives are a threat, like an open and evil threat. And so laments for their deaths. Can't you just remain silent, in the word of Ta-Nehisi Coates? Or do they really deserve the kind of sadness that people are pouring out upon them, according to Nicole Hannah-Jones? The New York Times, again, it remains just a repository of crap. It is an awful, awful publication. By the way, if you didn't think it was awful enough, the New York Times hates President Trump so much that all it took to get them to write a good piece about Marjorie Taylor Greene, a person with the intelligence of a turnip, is her turning on President Trump. That's all it took. It's truly amazing. They're writing odes. They're writing paeans to Marjorie Taylor Greene now. Quote, Greene, straying from Trump, reflects an emerging MAGA split. The right-wing Republican congresswoman from Georgia has grown disillusioned with her own party and with President Trump, and is increasingly willing to say so. Wow, strange new respect for the New York Times for Marjorie Taylor Greene. Can't imagine why they're doing that. Can't imagine. By the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene over the weekend, once again, suggested that she was going to be killed by nefarious forces because of her focus on Epstein and Israel. Quote, I am not suicidal, and one of the happiest, healthiest people you will meet. I have full faith in God, and Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. As a sinner, I am only saved through his grace and mercy. With that said, if something happens to me, I ask you all to find out which foreign government or powerful people would take heinous actions to stop the information from coming out. Not only about this issue, but because of the truth that I have been speaking. The people understand what I'm saying. Well, certainly the commenters did. All the commenters were posting anti-Semitic memes underneath her words, obviously. But don't worry. Her crazy, her specific brand of crazy, is now acceptable according to the New York Times. Again, horseshoe theory operating at full volume here. The New York Times says, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, the right-wing Republican from Georgia, did not appreciate being threatened by the White House over her backing for a bill ordering the release of the Epstein files. So after a Trump official put out the word that doing so would be viewed as a very hostile act, she called the top West Wing aide to push back. I told them, you didn't get me elected. I do not work for you. I work for my district, she recounted recently during a wide-ranging interview in her office on Capitol Hill. We aren't supposed to just be whipped on our votes because they're telling us what to do with this scary threat or saying we'll primary you or that we won't get invited to White House events. Me personally, I don't care, Ms. Greene went on. She's literally only a nationally famous person because Donald Trump picked her out of a lineup. That is the reason, because the left decided to attack her for all of her dumb old tweets. And then the right decided to defend her, including President Trump himself. That is the reason she is famous. Otherwise, she would be just one of 435 congresspeople that nobody had ever heard of. Quote, Ms. Greene is no longer a team player for Republicans in Congress, and she is no longer seen as a joke. Wow, strange new respect. All it took was her horseshoe theorying around to the anti-Semitic left and holding hands with them. And suddenly, the New York Times is writing stop pieces about her. What an amazing publication. I can't imagine why extremist violence is on the rise thanks to publications like the New York Times. Really solid stuff right there. All right, meanwhile, in other news, over in New York, the Zohran Mamdani campaign continues to truck along. Eric Adams has finally, far too late, dropped out of the race. Again, when you look at Polymarket, he is still the heavy favorite, Mamdani, to win the New York mayoral election. and Adams dropping out really did not affect things very much. Mamdani's still about an 85% favorite to win. Eric Adams was running in the low double digits here. In any case, here he was dropping out of the race yesterday, far too late.
It has been my honor to be your mayor, and I'm proud to say that we took that victory 4 years ago and turned it into action. And yet, despite all we've achieved, I cannot continue my re-election campaign. The constant media speculation about my future and the campaign finance board's decision to withhold millions of dollars have undermined my ability to raise the funds needed for a serious campaign. My fellow New Yorkers, this is your city. Its leaders work for you. I am one of you. My story is your story. I lived the struggle, but I never stopped loving this city. That is why I ran for mayor, to turn my pain into purpose. And I will keep fighting for the city, no matter what, from City Hall or beyond, because I am a New Yorker.
Oh, boy. Well, glad he could stick around long enough to make sure that his successor is a communist with Islamist tendencies. That's really wonderful. Speaking of that communist, Mamdani says that the solution to affordable housing in New York will be for the city to buy up housing from private owners. Presumably, he would do it through eminent domain or something, and then make it city-run, because nothing has succeeded like city-run housing. It's been working amazing for decades. We've never tried government housing before. It never results in slums. It never results in horrible living conditions, people abusing their housing. It's always just glorious. I mean, every place government housing is tried, it just works amazing. Well, speaking of public housing, I asked our sponsors and friends over at Comet, which is a project of Perplexity, to tell me about the public housing failures of the 60s and 70s in the U.S., just as a reminder. And here's what Comet says. Public housing in the United States during the 1960s and 70s is widely considered a policy failure because of a combination of social, economic, and political factors that led to the decline of many developments and widespread negative outcomes for residents. Causes of public housing failure include chronic underfunding and federal disinvestment. Authorities often placed public housing projects in already impoverished, racially segregated neighborhoods, worsening poverty and social isolation. Government efforts to reduce construction costs resulted in buildings that suffered from poor design and insufficient maintenance projects. Strict eligibility rules evicted families that saw even modest financial improvement, concentrating the poorest and most vulnerable populations together while driving out stable working-class tenants. And if you think none of this is going to happen, you're out of your mind. A lot of this is going to happen because, as it turns out, if you try to keep costs down, you end up basically doing it on the cheap, and then the housing is crap. If you try to use it as a labor program, you end up paying way too much, and at that point, you're impoverishing the taxpayer. And if you have no standards as to who is living there, people end up wrecking the housing because they don't actually own the housing, and they're not even responsible for what happens to the housing they live in. And so, as Comet points out, public housing projects became increasingly associated with crime, drugs, and gang activity as a result of concentrated poverty and lack of employment opportunities. Some of the biggest examples include the famous Prout Ego Complex in St. Louis, Missouri. There are entire books that have been written about this complex. It's a disaster area. So I'm glad that New York has decided to do all this again. How could it go wrong? So Zohran Mamdani enthusiastically endorses it based on his longtime experience as a failed rapper with a trust fund.
We'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership. We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale. And we can fully commit to a new era of social housing, ending subsidies for luxury housing development and using our wealth to build beautiful, high-quality social housing projects that offer good homes and strong communities to everyone. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do, and we have history to guide us.
Yes, we do have history to guide us. This crap fails every time in Stripe. Do it, New York. See how it works out for you. By the way, I know multiple real estate investors in New York who are very, very close to getting into deals to do more development in New York, and they all pulled out in the last 3 to 4 months because they know that Mamdani is going to make that nearly impossible now. So again, well done, Eric Adams, for sticking around just long enough to ensure that almost certainly Zohran Mamdani will end up being the mayor of New York. And again, congratulations to the people of New York who, I suppose you liked the 60s and 70s so much you just wanted to do it again? It's just that much fun for you? All right. Already coming up, the President of the United States is meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. They're trying to work out sort of the final form of an offer to Hamas to end the Gaza war. We'll get to all those details first. Let's be honest, traditional phone systems weren't built for how businesses actually work today. And when you miss a call, you're not just missing a conversation, you are losing business. Quo, formerly Open Phone, is the modern alternative. It's designed to help you work smarter, build stronger relationships, and never miss an opportunity. If you're tired of juggling multiple phones or being chained to a landline, Quo is exactly what your business needs. As the #1 business phone system, Quo streamlines all your customer communications through a simple app on your phone or computer, meaning you can literally run your business from anywhere. What's really smart about it is how your entire team can share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like they're working from a shared inbox, which keeps response times lightning fast and customers genuinely happy. But here's where it gets interesting. Quo's built-in AI does the heavy lifting by automatically logging calls, creating summaries, even automating your next steps. Their AI agent can actually answer calls, qualify leads, and even route customers to the right team member, so you never have to worry about leaving your customers hanging even after hours. Whether you're flying solo or you're leading a growing team, Quo keeps everyone connected while helping you deliver those standout customer experiences that make all the difference. It's no wonder over 90,000 businesses are already using it. Get started for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/Ben. That's QUO.com/Ben. If you have existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Also, you know what I hate? Running out of something I actually need and then scrambling to reorder it, especially when it comes to health, because consistency is a difference maker, which is why I signed up as a Balance of Nature preferred customer. Every 28 days, my supplements just show up at the door without me lifting a finger. No missed days, no, oh crap, I forgot to reorder. It's just automatic, so it's consistent. And when it's consistent, it actually sticks. Here's what got my attention. As a preferred customer, you're always getting the best price Balance of Nature offers. Always. That's as low as it gets every single order. Your wallet will notice the difference, guaranteed. And get this, shipping is completely free every single month. No tracking numbers to stress about, no extra fees. Balance of Nature handles all of that for you. But here's the best part. You get paired with your own personal health coach, not a chatbot, like an actual human who checks in with you, helps you stay on track, and looks at your whole picture. I use Balance of Nature particularly when I'm on the road because it's hard to stay healthy and eat healthy when you're on the road. Pop it in those smoothies, good to go. Why pay more when you don't have to? It saves you money, time, and hassle. You don't have to plan ahead because your routine plans itself. Go to balanceofnature.com, use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get that free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro, balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro. Meanwhile, on the economic front, the President of the United States is scheduled to host last-ditch talks to avoid a government shutdown on Monday. The Republicans are pledging a clean CR, like a 7-week extension of the current spending levels, and Democrats, for no reason that anybody can really discern, are now talking about shutting down the government. They want additional spending because we're not spending enough money, apparently. I mean, that is despite our nearly $40 trillion national debt. According to the Wall Street Journal, a White House meeting is scheduled for Monday ahead of an expected redo of a Senate vote that will determine whether Congress will keep the government funded beyond Tuesday. House Republicans passed a bill this month that would fund the government into late November and add millions for security for lawmakers and other officials. Democrats blocked that measure, and then they want bipartisan negotiations on health care funding. So it's unclear exactly what Democrats are aiming for. They want more money for Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire. Apparently, both Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, and Senate Majority Leader Thune have said that any resolution to the standoff would likely involve some sort of negotiation over Obamacare credits. John Thune says the ball's in Democrats' court. Like, all we are doing is just extending current spending levels here.
Is the government going to shut down this week, Leader Thune?
Totally up to the Democrats. The ball is in their court. There is a bill sitting at the desk in the Senate right now. We could pick it up today and pass it. That has been passed by the House, that will be signed into law by the President to keep the government open. So this decision, in my judgment, at this point in time, is up to a handful of Democrats. We need 8 Democrats to pass it through the Senate, something that 13 times, when the Democrats had the majority over the last 4 years and President Biden was in the White House, Republicans helped Democrats do.
And so that is also being said by Speaker Johnson, who says the real goal here is to somehow increase payments for health care for illegal immigrants, which isn't even legal in the first place.
It is illegal for illegal aliens to receive health care paid for by hardworking American taxpayers. But they're making the demand to change that. They want to add that back in. That's one of Chuck Schumer's primary demands, to keep the government open, and we're not going to do that. The American people didn't vote for us to do that. We're trying to clean up the system. So what they're demanding, they know is outrageous. They know it's far beyond the pale. And look, I challenge anybody listening to us, Jake, go pull this up. You will see there is nothing partisan in what we have passed and presented to the Senate. Chuck Schumer is doing this for one reason. He is trying to get cover from the far left base of his party because they've been hammering him for not fighting Trump. So he's going to try to show that he's fighting Trump, but he has absolutely no logical basis for doing so here.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who's already overridden by the House majority, he says, no, this is just about meeting the needs of the American people because we need a shutdown or something.
We are always of the view that we need to fund the government and make sure that the services that the American people rely upon can continue to be received, and also that we stand by our federal civil servants. We've seen since January 20th, mass firings already taking place by the Trump administration in the absence of government shutdown, because this is what they've determined to do, hurt everyday Americans. We consistently have made the point. We want to find a bipartisan path forward and reach a spending agreement with our Republican colleagues that actually meets the needs of the American people, but that also addresses the Republican health care crisis that is harming everyday Americans all across the country.
Well, good luck with this argument. If Democrats shut down the government here, they're the ones who are going to own it. And frankly, Republicans are like, fine, you want to do that? We'll fire a bunch of people. We'll use the opportunity for a government shutdown, not just to temporarily furlough workers. If we can get away with it, we'll fire people. Don't threaten us with a good time. Steve Scalise, the House Majority Whip, he says exactly that.
Well, I haven't seen the full details, but if you go back to COVID, Martha, President Biden dramatically expanded, mushroomed the size of the federal government, supposedly to deal with COVID. Well, COVID is over, and yet many of those federal agencies are still 20 or 30% larger than they were before COVID. And so there's been a need for a right sizing of the federal government for a long time. President Trump's talked about that with DOGE and other things he's doing to try to save waste, fraud, and abuse in government. And I think everybody knows there are billions and tens of billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse that still needs to be rooted out. We got to some of that, but there's more that needs to be done.
Now, again, what's truly amazing about this is the Democrats really don't have any sort of political leg to stand on here. Americans are not clamoring for a government shutdown. And it's not as though Democrats have a long-standing history of shutting down the government in order to avoid further spending. They're now shutting down the government in order to achieve even bigger spending. This is idiocy. Who is the constituency for this outside of the far left? The answer is it doesn't really exist, but Democrats are just scoring own goals at an incredibly rapid rate. The same holds true with regard to the DOJ. So right now, Democrats could make a plausible argument, in fact, a highly plausible argument, in my opinion, that the attempt by the Justice Department to go after James Comey is misguided. That actually there's not enough material there to go after James Comey on legal grounds. Now, listen, I don't think that is going to be like an incredibly fertile field to sow, because frankly, most Americans don't like James Comey. They think that he's a big weirdo. He's a big gangly weirdo. He's a big, weird, giant Frankenstein monster who's ready to jump out from behind curtains and sort of create bizarre seashell mosaics and such, and wander around lonely in the forest trying to find Bigfoot. So nobody's shedding a lot of tears for James Comey. With that said, it's not an amazing look for the Trump administration to pretty openly say they're targeting James Comey, and now for the president to say he's also targeting Adam Schiff, because most Americans aren't real fond of that. And the details here are not incredible to the ear. According to the Wall Street Journal, when Lindsay Halligan secured the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey this past week, it marked the pinnacle of her rise in President Trump's orbit, from an insurance lawyer to the person he has entrusted with the sensitive task of deploying the law to punish a longtime enemy. Last Saturday, Trump appointed Halligan to lead the U.S. Attorney's Office in Eastern Virginia, where her predecessor had resigned under pressure to prosecute Trump's adversaries. With the help of a small team at the FBI and limited assistance from other lawyers in the office wary of their new boss, she secured an indictment of Comey on Thursday. So, apparently, Halligan presented the case herself, which is not particularly typical. The jury decided to indict on only 2 of the 3 charges it was presented. Now, that's saying a lot about the weakness of a case, because the old saying about a grand jury is you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. So if you bring 3 charges and the grand jury says no to one of them, That is one thing. Then the judge told Lindsay Halligan she had 2 documents before her that were inconsistent with one another. One document contained only 2 of the charges. The other document had all 3. Halligan learned of her appointment to the new role last Saturday evening around the time Trump posted a message on social media expressing his frustration with the DOJ's failure to prosecute. So basically, he appointed her. 5 minutes later, she pushed forward with the indictment. The grand jury didn't give her everything she wanted. And a lot of lawyers out there are saying it's a pretty weak case. Okay, so Democrats theoretically could make some hay here. Are they going to? It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult because, frankly, they allowed the DOJ to become a political tool under Joe Biden, and they celebrated it at the time. So when Chuck Schumer now says he has no faith in the Justice Department, it's like, dude, you were there the whole time. You were there for Eric Holder calling himself Barack Obama's wingman, and you were there for Loretta Lynch on the tarmac with the Clintons, and you were there while Joe Biden was using his power to go after his chief political opponent, the man who preceded him and then replaced him. Now here's Chuck Schumer complaining.
I have no faith in Donald Trump's judicial system. He has turned this judicial system to be his own political fighter, do what he wants politically, so that he tells them to go after people he doesn't like. He tells them to exonerate people that he likes. So many people are getting pardoned and this and that. He has turned this Justice Department into his own political watchdog. It's horrible.
Okay, well, again, I would take that a little more seriously if you had not spent years blowing out your own credibility along these lines. Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, she says, well, this whole prosecution of Comey, it's about revenge, not the law, which sort of begs a question. Revenge for what? What is he revenging himself? Oh, do you mean that he's revenging himself for the time that you guys used the DOJ to go after him? Would that be the thing you're saying right now?
What I see this as a former prosecutor myself, this is weaponizing the Justice Department, basically taking a career prosecutor who was recommended by the Republican governor of the state of Virginia, clearly has Republican roots, who made a decision based on the evidence over a period of months, made a decision. Then he's forced out so that the president can install his own aide into the job. When I questioned Attorney General Bondi during her confirmation hearing, she assured me that politics would not play a role, that they would make independent decisions. That is not what this is. This is a vengeance prosecution. It is not about the law.
And now again, the question becomes revenge for what? Revenge for what? If you didn't speak out while the DOJ was targeting Donald Trump and while Russiagate was going on, you're touting the magic of Russiagate, it's very difficult now to turn around and claim that what Trump is doing is unprecedented and terrifying. What's good for the goose has to be good for the gander in order for any of this to work. Okay, meanwhile, on foreign policy, the President of the United States is slated to hold talks with Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, today. There have been major negotiations over an offer to Hamas to essentially end the Gaza war. Now, essentially, the people who are negotiating right now are negotiating with themselves. They have no idea what Hamas is going to say. Qatar has been rewriting the proposals. Egypt has been rewriting the proposals. Other Arab countries are involved in the proposals. The United States is involved. Israel is involved. It appears that the United States and Israel are now sort of on the same page. The President of the United States put out a statement saying that talks appeared to be nearing their end, that the war was in its final stages. Now, again, President Trump has been very optimistic about a number of possible deals over the course of his second presidency, ranging from Russia-Ukraine to deals having to do with Iran. So it would not be a shock if this all fell apart because Hamas has no interest, actually, in surrendering the hostages. The original draft of the 21-point document shared by the United States with a handful of Arab and Muslim countries earlier this week on the UN General Assembly sidelines, the plan is fairly controversial. It is significantly looser on Hamas in the Gaza Strip than Israelis would probably like. With that said, it does put the onus on Hamas to release the hostages and the onus on the temporary government to change its constituency so that Hamas isn't running the place. The 21-point plan, not to go through the whole thing, includes provisions like Gaza will be a de-radicalized terror-free zone that does not pose a threat to its neighbors, which sounds great in theory. The question is how you make that happen in practice. If Israel and Hamas agree to the proposal, the war will immediately end, with the IDF halting all operations and gradually withdrawing from the Strip. Within 48 hours of Israel publicly accepting the deal, all living and deceased hostages would be returned. Once the hostages were returned, Israel would free several hundred Palestinian security prisoners serving life sentences. That means murderers and terrorists. Again, that's not the United States' fault. That's Israel's fault. Israel has a bizarre view with regard to hostages, which is that basically any price ought to be paid for hostages. Again, you have to understand the emotional empathy that Israelis have for hostages and their families, which has been crippling the country since October 7th and well before. But it is a bad warfighting strategy. What led all of this off in the first place was an idiotic deal pursued by then Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to get an IDF soldier named Gilad Shalit back for 1,000 Hamas terrorists, including Yahya Sinwar, the architect of October 7th. So this sort of math is always bad. Nonetheless, once the hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence will be granted amnesty, while members who wish to leave the Strip will be granted safe passage to receiving countries. Now, I don't even know how you commit to peaceful coexistence if you're a Hamas member. All that means, presumably, is that you lie and you say that you are now willing to, what, live in peace with everybody else? And if Israel isn't there to police the place, how exactly are you stopped from, rearming? Aid, as soon as the agreement is reached, aid would surge into the Strip at rates no lower than the benchmark set in the January 2025 hostage deal, including 600 trucks of aid per day, along with rehab of critical infrastructure and the entry of equipment for removing rubble. And aid would be distributed by the UN, which means that it would go directly back to Hamas, obviously. Now, it's possible the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a joint American-Israeli operation, which is not handing aid to Hamas, would be involved. But having the UN involved basically means that a lot of this money and material could flow back to Hamas. Gaza would be administered by a temporary transitional government of Palestinian technocrats who will be responsible for providing day-to-day services for the people of the Strip. The committee will be supervised by a new international body established by the U.S. in consultation with Arab and European partners. It will establish a framework for funding the redevelopment of Gaza until the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program. Well, good luck to that. The Palestinian Authority is deeply corrupt. It still retains a form of pay for slay, meaning they pay people to kill Jews. The Palestinian Authority doesn't really even handle security in the so-called West Bank anymore. It's a disaster area. The Palestinian Authority is in a state of full-scale collapse in Judea and Samaria, but I guess the idea is that the PA is going to somehow handle the Gaza Strip. And then an economic zone would be established. Now, again, some of this is unobjectionable. Some of this is really bad planning, because I can recall a time when Israel made an international commitment to pull out from the Gaza Strip, have no military forces in the Gaza Strip, hand over running of the Gaza Strip to the Palestinian Authority. European aid would flow in. Some American oversight would take place. It was called 2005. Israel did it. Hamas took over within a year and then used it as a terror base. So Israel can't afford that right now, obviously. Now, with that said, it's very doubtful any of this comes to fruition, because I really, really, really doubt that Hamas is going to take Israel up on any of this. Anything that even titularly gets rid of Hamas as the ruling party in Gaza is unlikely to be accepted by Hamas. Hamas is running out of running room here, with that said. Apparently, one of the conditions of the deal here is that if Hamas does not accept the deal, Qatar will expel Hamas leadership from the country. Hamas leadership knows that once it's expelled from the country, it's kind of fair game for Israel to kill them. Apparently, some of the other provisions that would create pressure on Hamas, the biggest thing that's happening right now is that Israel is being extraordinarily successful in its campaign in Gaza City. You remember all of the run-up to Rafah earlier in March 2024 or so. All eyes on Rafah. Israel's going to commit genocide in Rafah. And then it turns out that Israel did an impeccable job of clearing the city of civilians and taking out the terrorists with minimal loss of life. You recall that. Well, the same thing seems to be happening in Gaza City, where over 800,000 Palestinian civilians have already evacuated, despite the fact that Hamas is trying to shoot people as they leave. So that military victory in Gaza City seems to be the end of the war, no matter how you slice it, whether there is a deal or not. Even if the hostages are not back, it is very likely at that point the United States and Israel say the war has effectively ended. Military counterinsurgency has now begun. Those operations will continue until the release or the freeing of the hostages by the IDF. Benjamin Netanyahu last night appeared on Fox News, where he praised President Trump for his efforts.
Well, we're working on it, Jackie. It's not been finalized yet, but we're working with President Trump's team, actually as we speak, and I hope we can make it a go, because we want to free our hostages. We want to get rid of Hamas rule and have them disarmed, Gaza demilitarized, and a new future set up for for Gazans and Israelis alike, and for the whole region.
And so, obviously, there's a lot of optimism today. We'll see very, very soon whether that optimism is justified based on Hamas's reaction to all of this. Alrighty, folks, the show continues for our members right now. In just a moment, we'll get to China and Russia. Russia continues to slam Ukraine, and America's policy seems to be changing pretty radically in response. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us. Already coming up, comedians head to Riyadh to pay homage to the royal family, are real truth tellers in America. Plus, a terrorist attack on a synagogue in Manchester, England. No one is surprised, and the government shutdown continues. First, what if I told you 9/11 could have been prevented? The warning shot came 1 year earlier when al-Qaeda suicide bombers ripped open the USS Cole in Yemen. 17 American sailors were killed. Dozens were wounded. Washington called it a criminal act. But in reality, it was al-Qaeda's declaration of war, and America, under Bill Clinton, ignored it. On October 10th, Daily Wire Plus premieres USS Cole, al-Qaeda's strike before 9/11, the untold story of ignored intelligence, the blast itself, and the investigation that exposed al-Qaeda's network. Less than a year later, the towers fell. Don't miss the premiere. Get 40% off a new Daily Wire Plus annual membership with code FALL40 at dailywireplus.com. Alrighty, folks, so it came off of Yom Kippur last night to find out that there had been another terror attack against Jews, this time in Manchester, England. So to understand why this is happening, first you have to understand the demographics of Manchester. Manchester in the UK has a fairly large Jewish community. Something like 22% of the entire population of Manchester is Muslim. This is very similar to London. 15% of the entire population of London is Muslim. Why does this matter? Well, because if there's a shooting or a stabbing attack at a synagogue in London or in Manchester, it's pretty clear where that is going to come from. And lo and behold, we now find that the suspect's name is, I kid you not, Jihad. That is the person's first name, is Jihad, which, again, I will say is a little on the nose. According to the Wall Street Journal, 2 people were killed and several injured in a ramming and stabbing attack outside a British synagogue in what police described as a terrorist incident during the Jewish holy day of Yom Kippur. The attacker drove a car into a group of people in the northern English city of Manchester just after 9:30 a.m. local time on Thursday before getting out and stabbing a member of the public. Security guards and worshippers stopped the man who was wearing what looked like explosive devices from entering the temple. Within minutes, armed officers arrived and shot the suspect dead. 4 other people suffered serious injuries, according to the police. Now, again, none of this is surprising. None of this is surprising. It's not surprising because Britain has decided to import gigantic populations of people who are extraordinarily warm toward anti-Jew terrorism and toward terrorism in general. And that requires some explication. Why exactly is that happening? Number one, why do all these people have a view of the world that ends in violence? And number two, why has the West decided en masse to import these people and then march along with those people, join those people? Because it wasn't just that there was a terrorist attack in Manchester yesterday. It was accompanied by a massive protest in Manchester, literally a couple of hours later, in solidarity with the Palestinians. There's also a giant protest in London. According to the UK Daily Mail, a woman attending a pro-Palestine protest on the day of the horrific knife attack outside a synagogue has said she, quote, doesn't give up about the Jewish community. Hundreds of activists have gathered outside the gates of Downing Street in Westminster as part of a protest against the detention of members of the global Sumud flotilla, which included Greta Thunberg. This is this idiot flotilla where a bunch of left-wing ideologues decided to float their boats toward Gaza just to get arrested by the IDF and then presumably sent in the back of an El Al plane next to the bathrooms back to Europe. The march, taking place just hours after 2 people were killed in a barbaric knife attack outside Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester, has been criticized for its poor timing and described as disgraceful and disrespectful behavior. Well, apparently it's only the disrespect that is upsetting to many members of the public over in Britain. It is not the fact that they are marching in solidarity with, Hamas, because it turns out that flotilla was, in fact, financially associated with groups that do business with Hamas. Fiona Smith, 42, was among those taking part in the demonstration, during which she was heard saying, I don't give a bleep about the Jewish community right now. I thought about it. I'm sorry about what happened, but the whole story and why we're here is because of what happened yesterday with the flotilla. Now, I just want to note something. Jihad, the guy who actually committed the terrorist attack, and Fiona, 42. And Fiona does not sound like a radical Muslim. Fiona sounds like a normal leftist millennial. They are on the same page. And so this becomes a question. Why are they on the same page? And the reason that they are on the same page is because they are part of the same movement. They're part of the same broad movement. I talk about this in my book, Lions and Scavengers, at length. This is basically what the entire book is about. Here's what I wrote in the book. Okay, and again, I wrote this starting 2 years ago. Quote, The scavengers have gathered here in the beating heart of what was once the center of Western civilization to bay for more blood and to scream at a West which insists that defense against terror is the first right of all men. The spirit of the scavenger is the spirit of envy. That spirit animates those who destroy successful men and civilizations. The scavenger is driven by a burning impulse, the impulse to escape his own failures and shortcomings by blaming others. The scavenger believes that his own failure is the fault of the stars, of the fates, but mostly of the lion. The scavenger is a creature of frustration, alienation, and vengeance. If the lions fail their children, their own children join the scavengers. Unmoored from a civilization their parents refuse to defend, they become rabid and go in search of revenge on those who left them adrift. They lead a rebellion of privilege. Bred into unearned prosperity, but taught ignorance and dependency, they look close at hand for monsters to destroy. They become the hellish mutation of a spent culture. The children of lions can become scavengers. And what we are watching here is precisely that. We are watching the children of lions, British millennials, marching alongside people who are incredibly sympathetic to mass terrorism against Jews. And this has been a long time in coming in Europe. It goes all the way back to the days of the nihilist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, who suggested that the West should join in on its own cultural suicide. He literally wrote, quote, "It's our turn to tread the path step by step, which leads down to native level. But to become natives altogether, our soil must be occupied by a formerly colonized people, and we must starve of hunger." And that is something that he wrote back during the 1960s. And it is not a shock that many of the people who march in solidarity with terrorism are, again, some of the richest people in the history of Western civilization. As I write in the book, scavengers are plentiful among those for whom life is too easy. It is one of the great ironies of history that revolutionaries are typically drawn not from the ranks of the abject poor, but the idle bourgeois. The bored are those who need not struggle for their daily bread, who are not dedicated to the demands of family, who are disengaged from the larger community. They seek a feeling of meaning that can be found in either building or tearing down, and finding themselves incapable of building, they choose the latter option. University students are all too often the seedbed for revolution for precisely this reason. They have no families to support, they are often supported by their parents, and they have intellectual pretensions of their own. The frisson of blood often excites the scavengers. In the name of pseudo-justice, the scavenger becomes a hero to the group by expressing his willingness to do violence. That is what we are watching in the West. That is what we are watching. Now, when Charlie Kirk was shot, I talked about permission structures for violence. I talked about the kinds of structures that lead people to do violence and the people who actually foment those ideologies. Some ideologies are worse than other ideologies. Not all ideologies are the same. Radical Islam is one of those ideologies that is just worse than other ideologies. Some ideologies are toxic and breed violence. And as I mentioned, again, when I was talking about the ideology that led to the shooting of Charlie, these ideologies share three basic underpinnings. First, a conspiratorial view of the universe, in which some shadowy cabal of powerful people are responsible for your shortcomings and your unhappiness, and in which the arguments they make are not arguments at all, they're just a facade for power. These are people who believe that the system is rigged and bad, and a conspiracy is at the root of that system. Second, a belief that your specific group is targeted for destruction by that system run by that shadowy cabal. And that leads to the third belief, which is that violence is a form of self-defense. So for radical Muslims, that translates as, my civilization's failures, my own failures, are not my failures or my civilization's failures. They're a result of imperialism or colonialism or the nefarious Jew, and their success is a genocidal threat to me. But it's not enough for radical Muslims to have a terrible ideological system. There have to be permission structures from major players. And in Britain, there are. There are permission structures on the left in Britain. And broadly speaking, permission structures come from fellow travelers, people who broadly agree that all the systems condemned by these radical ideologues are indeed bad and need to be torn down, that Western systems are bad and flawed and conspiratorial. Even if they think all that for a different reason, they still believe that the system and its conspiracy-laden coterie of elites must be torn to the ground. And there are lots of people in the West who give this sort of nonsense credence because it allows them to join in the attack on the conspiratorial system. You know, the people who spend every day talking about a non-existent genocide in Gaza, or who attribute Israel's success to a conspiracy of evil Jews in the United States who manipulate the system in order to achieve foreign aid and then cover for their genocidal sex rings, all while depriving American citizens of health care and housing. Those same people have little or nothing to say about radical Islam because, again, they are allied with radical Islam in order to take down, they'll ally with anybody, it doesn't matter. They'll ignore the sins of their fellow travelers because what matters more is taking down the conspiratorial system. And this is why you are seeing an eruption of violence. That eruption of violence is not relegated across the water. That outbreak of violence has happened in the United States. There was an attack on 2 members of the Israeli embassy just a few months ago in Washington, D.C. 2 people were shot to death by a man shouting Free Palestine. There's a woman who's burned to death in Colorado by a man shouting Free Palestine. Okay, this is not some sort of gigantic shock. It is happening, and it is happening because of the permission structures for violence. It is happening because some ideologies are worse than other ideologies. Members of these bad ideologies have been imported by fellow travelers and then massaged by fellow travelers. That is why this is becoming more common. No, who is surprised? Seriously, who is surprised? Question. I was not surprised. I'm not sure that there's anybody who went to synagogue on Yom Kippur who emerged after Yom Kippur and went on their phone and saw what had happened and was surprised. Because every synagogue on planet Earth right now has extra security. All of them. Okay, that is not happening because of delusion. That is happening because of additional threat. And of course, it isn't relegated to just synagogues. There are churches that are being targeted by people of radical ideologies, like radical Islam or radical LGBTQ plus ideology. Again, scavengers who are seeking to tear down the system that also have to have extra security. In the battle between lions and scavengers, the scavengers are a coalition of people who don't get along with each other on anything else except for these things are bad. The systems have to be torn down. And so spare me when I hear the British government making expressions of sympathy. The British government has made this possible. The British government is at least morally responsible for this sort of stuff. Because not only are they massaging it, they're bolstering it, they're inflating it. Okay, in just a few minutes, we're going to get into why is all of this happening? Why has the West taken in so many people who truly hate the West, hate Jews and all the rest? And we'll get to the government shutdown, all the rest of the news. First, when was the last time you bragged about your wireless company? Like, did you know my wireless company gave away 1,000 American flags to deserving vets and forgave $10 million in veteran debt? Did you know my wireless company raised almost $500,000 to prevent veteran suicide? When your wireless company is Pure Talk, there's a whole lot to brag about. You can even brag about the coverage you get with Pure Talk, a 5G network that is insanely fast, dependable, and secure. And you can brag about how much money you save with Pure Talk. Unlimited talk, text, and 15 gigs of high-speed data is just $35 a month with mobile hotspot. I'm constantly using Pure Talk. I'm abroad right now. I'm using Pure Talk. Okay, the reality is that Pure Talk, best coverage in the United States. They have excellent tower networks, and you're not going to pay as much as you would at other places. It's time to switch to my wireless company, Pure Talk. If you need another reason, something you can really brag about, Pure Talk is the only wireless company that gives you a 1-year free membership to Daily Wire Plus when you go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Again, choose a qualifying plan at puretalk.com/Shapiro and relish your free 1-year membership to Daily Wire Plus. Pure Talk, wireless worth bragging about. Go check them out. puretalk.com right now. Also, this fall, I'm joining the Good Ranchers community in getting back to the table at least once a week between now and Thanksgiving. My family and I will be turning off the phones, turning off the TV, gathering around our table no matter what story is breaking. Truthfully, this isn't a hard ask for us because we do this all the time, but everyone should do this because the dinner table is where good stuff happens. It's also where my kids fight and shout at each other and everything. But I will tell you that the dinner table time is so important. It's when the kids engage with each other. It's when they tell us about their day. It's when they feel seen and heard. Well, you should do the same with 100% American meat. Locally sourced from American family farms and ranches delivered straight to your door. People at my company, they've been using Good Ranchers like nobody's business. And we have like a set of toddlers in our office, and basically they are living only off of Good Ranchers, the children of our employees, not our actual employees. Right now, you get $40 off plus free meat for life when you subscribe with my code Ben. That's Ben for $40 off and free meat for life. GoodRanchers.com. Let's get back to the table and do it in the right way with good old-fashioned American beef. Go check it out right now, GoodRanchers.com, and get $40 off plus free meat for life when you subscribe with code Ben. Keir Starmer, the awful Prime Minister of the UK, who just 5 minutes ago was saying that Palestinians should be given a state after the worst terror assault on Jews since World War II. This guy was out there saying they're going to do everything they can to keep our Jewish community safe. Apparently, that does not include stopping the importation of gigantic numbers of people who hate Western civilization and Jews, and then massaging all of their viewpoints. I mean, literally, Keir Starmer's Labour Party 3 days ago voted to call what's going on in Gaza a genocide, which is a lie. It is a full-scale, ridiculous lie. There is no definition of genocide by which what's going on in Gaza is genocide. But that lie gets done what needs to get done, which is it feeds the conspiratorial ideology. It feeds that terrible ideology of conspiracy that leads to murder. And here's Keir Starmer lying.
The attack in Manchester this morning is absolutely shocking, and all of our thoughts are with those affected. I'm on my way back to London. When I arrive, I will chair an emergency COBRA meeting. I'm already able to say that additional police assets are being deployed to synagogues across the country, and we will do everything to keep our Jewish community safe.
They'll do everything except for, expel the gigantic number of foreigners in Britain who hate Jews and hate Britain. That they'll continue. They're not going to touch that. By the way, notice in that statement, there's not a mention of Jews. His heart goes out to everybody who was injured. Everybody. It was a specifically anti-Jewish attack in Manchester. That's what it was. But don't worry, he has a vague statement for that. So does the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who himself has expressed support for radical Islam. Quote, "I'm horrified by the violent attack at a synagogue in Manchester. I've been in contact with the mayor of Great Manchester and the Home Secretary, and would like to reassure Londoners that the Met Police are stepping up patrols in Jewish communities and synagogues across London. My thoughts are with those affected on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. London stands ready to help in any way we can, except for, stopping the tacit and open support for people who love terrorism. That they're not going to do." The British Home Secretary is a person named Shabana Mahmood. She's the person who is she's in charge of the Home Secretary of Immigration Policy. She literally marched with the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Britain has been overtaken by the scavengers. And they've imported a huge number of people who are totally fine with and support, in fact, terrorism. A poll just back in April of 2024, conducted in the UK, revealed that British Muslims, 46% of them expressed their backing for Hamas. Not for the Palestinians, for Hamas, like the actual terror group, 46%. Also, only 25% of UK Muslims believed that Hamas terrorists committed murder and rape during the October 7th attacks in Israel, which means truly 3/4 of them are quasi-supporters of Hamas. Because if you don't believe that Hamas committed murder and rape during October 7th, that's like people who say that Al-Qaeda didn't do 9/11. Okay, like there's a reason for that. Okay, part of this is just Western blindness. Okay, not all of it is full fellow traveling. Some of it is just Western stupidity. Suicidal empathy, as God's dad says. An unwillingness to understand other cultures. Not every culture works in the same way the West works. Some cultures are just worse. Radical Islam is a worse culture. It is an awful, terrible, evil culture. It is a bad culture. Not all of Islam, radical Islam. Unfortunately, there are a lot of radical Muslims on planet Earth. Leland Vitter, formerly of Fox News, sat down with the Free Press and explained an experience he had interviewing a would-be Palestinian suicide bomber. Listen to this.
And Wafa had been a woman in the West Bank, a woman in Gaza. She had pulled a pot of boiling water over herself when she was like 5 or 6 years old. The Israelis treat most of the people out of Gaza who have really horrific burns, catastrophic medical injuries. She goes back to Gaza after being treated for 4 or 5 years in Israel, but has a pass to get in and out of Israel, which very few people in Gaza did at the time. So she gets recruited to be a suicide bomber. This is in the Second Intifada, so mid-2000s. And there's the video of her coming to the checkpoint to get into Israel wearing her suicide vest. And she'd been given 3 target options by the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade: a bus, a cafe, or the hospital that had treated her and saved her life. She chose the hospital that had treated her and saved her life. She gets to the checkpoint. They discover that she has a bomb, or they really think she does. She tries to detonate it. It doesn't go off. She gets thrown in jail. Again, the Israelis treat her. They help her with her burns. They educate her. They give her a college degree. And now in the Gilad Shalit deal, she goes back to Gaza. So I go to Gaza to interview her thinking this is going to be a redemption story. It was before Christmas, right? That she's going to say,
perfect Christmas story.
I am going to be the one to try and forge peace, and I believe in peace, and I've seen that the Israelis are not evil, that I don't want to kill them anymore. Fine. So I get into Gaza, and I bring with me an iPad that has the video of her trying to blow herself up. So we're sitting across from each other like this. She's wearing a hijab in a very junky Gazan apartment. It is an awful place in every sense of the word. And I show her the video. And I said, what are you thinking watching this? And she goes, oh. Has all this reaction. And she goes, I'm thinking I almost tasted paradise. Okay. Would you do it again? Absolutely, in a minute. This is my calling in life.
So, as you can see, that is a very different ideology from the kind of ideology that Americans or Europeans have. But either we are blind to it, or we are perfectly willing, at least in large part in the West, to humor this idea and import it. These are people who live within our borders. We brought them in. Here is San Francisco State Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, literally this week, saying at a pro-Palestine conference in the United States that there is a very rich debate inside the Palestinian movement over hijacking planes.
Historically, until now, Palestinians have no agreement over hijacking planes. Nobody, until now, since 68, until now, there is no agreement whether external operations are okay or not. Nobody, until now, there is a big debate in the Palestinian movement, right? In very rich debate, whether it is okay or it's not okay. So it's like, why we're having debates about that too. It's a very different kind of debate in the eyes of the fascists.
In the eyes of the fascists would be you and me, people who don't like hijacking of planes. It's a very, very different debate. Okay, we imported this, and then the people that we import try to tear down our civilization. Representative Ilhan Omar, who is warm rhetorically to pretty much all radical Islam, it's not a question why she says that we should abolish ICE. This is not a shock. This is not a surprise. Here was Ilhan Omar, not very long ago, like in the last 48 hours, talking about abolishing ICE.
Is ICE too entrenched to even be abolished at this point?
I mean, nothing is too entrenched to be abolished. Okay. We just need the will of the people and the will of Congress.
Wow. I mean, so abolishing ICE from people who are imported to the country from some of the worst parts of planet Earth, but we need to abolish ICE because we have to make sure there are no immigration standards. I can't imagine what that's about. It seems like a giant shock. Or take, for example, Hassan Piker, the New York Times beloved Hassan Piker, who himself has talked over and over and over again about the violence that he wishes to be done to his political enemies. Now he's trying to walk that back, sort of, kind of, by randomly declaring that what he's talking about is structural violence. Here he was being intellectually pantsed by Ross Douthat over at the New York Times.
All politics, in my worldview, revolves around the distribution of resources and the distribution of power. And a big part of that component is, of course, violence as well. Revolutionary violence, for example. And it just simply means, like, who gets to do the violence and who gets to be on the receiving end of that violence that we have normalized. Because the systems that we exist under are inherently violent. All political systems are. It's just more so about redirecting that. And I know violence is such a scary concept in this when we're discussing in this way, but we're talking about it in an academic context. But basically, the idea is that instead of having a system that currently benefits the very few, I want a system that benefits as many people as possible, that has more, like I said, egalitarian outcomes.
Permission structures for revolutionary violence. Don't worry, he's just talking about structure. He's talking about intellectually. Well, every member of the scavenger coterie will say that it's intellectual right up until the point it's not intellectual anymore. And when you're talking about spewing people's intestines across stages, which is the kind of stuff that Hassan Piker has talked about, I don't believe you. This is the permission structure for violence, and it has real victims, real actual victims. But we are a West that is so... We are so in our own heads. We are so weak and pathetic that we are willing to go to other countries to talk about how weak and pathetic we are. Show the neck. I mean, again, the thing that is happening right now in the West, aside from the importation of what I call the barbarians in Lions and Scavengers, is the fellow travelers who are walking with them, who like what they are doing, who like where they are directing their violence, who share the same general conspiracy theory, even if they don't share the exact pathway toward that conspiracy theory. The people who are willing to redirect violence toward that supposed conspiracy of power. And the fools who are perfectly willing to go abroad ripping into the values of the West for money. Alrighty, coming up, our bravest Americans, the comedians, the ones who speak truth to power, they went to Riyadh, where they did not speak any truth to power. They did rip on the United States, however, because they are cowards. First, I always assumed restless sleep was inevitable. Night after night, tossing and turning, waking up with that aching back. I'd convinced myself that's just how sleep was supposed to be. Then I tried Helix Sleep and everything changed. It's truly been transformative for my sleep quality. Now I easily fall asleep in minutes, even when current news stories are continuously demanding my attention. What makes Helix different is they don't just sell you a random mattress, they actually match you with the perfect mattress for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, somewhere in between, they've got you covered. They make it so simple to get your best night's sleep every single night. All you have to do is take their sleep quiz, get matched with a custom mattress based on your body type and sleep preferences. And trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept on anything else. Now, I have that Helix Sleep mattress at home. I'm not at home right now, which means I'm not sleeping as well. And I got to tell you, just for sleep quality, can't wait to get back on my Helix Sleep mattress. Right now, Helix is still offering an incredible Labor Day sale. Visit helixsleep.com/Ben, get 27% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name after checkout so they know we sent you. Again, just visit helixsleep.com/Ben for this exclusive offer. Also, do you owe back taxes? Are your tax returns still unfiled? Did you forget that tax extension? Well, the October 15th deadline is fast approaching. Time is unfortunately running out. If you haven't gathered all your documents or made any estimated payments, you could soon be targeted by the IRS. They can garnish your wages, freeze your bank accounts, even seize your property. But there's help available. Tax Network USA, a nationwide tax firm, has helped taxpayers save over $1 billion in tax debt. They filed hundreds of thousands of tax returns and assisted thousands in reducing their tax burdens, and they can help you as well. Don't wait. Visit tnusa.com/Shapiro or call 1-800-958-1000 for a 100% free consultation. In one short call, the experts at Tax Network USA will guide you through some simple questions and determine how much you can save. Take action now before it's too late. Visit tnusa.com/Shapiro or call 1-800-958-1000. Again, that's tnusa.com/Shapiro or give them a call at 1-800-958-1000. You don't want to go up against the IRS alone. Instead, find some help at tnusa.com/Shapiro or give them a call, 1-800-958-1000 for a 100% free consultation. For, at this point, literally years, we've been hearing about the power and magic of the comedians, right? The comedians who are not just telling jokes, and they're not just telling, they are speaking truth to power. And they're going for the clapter. They're the ones who will say the things no one else will say. They're the ones who are breaking open the Overton window. They're the ones who are really saying the unsayable. And traditionally, comedians have done that. Traditionally, comedians violate taboos because when you violate a taboo, it's just inherently funny. Or at least transgressivism can be funny because it shocks your sensibilities. It doesn't have to be funny, but it shocks your sensibilities, and the natural reaction when someone does something that is transgressive is to laugh. Okay, so comedians have always had this sort of role in society. And sometimes that role can be properly directed because the things they're attacking are worthwhile. But sometimes it turns out that the transgressivism of these comedians is really just about the clicks. It's really just about faux transgressivism. Because when it comes down to it, they are perfectly willing to take money from some of the world's most repressive human beings and then crap on America in the process. And here, I mention Dave Chappelle. So Dave Chappelle, along with Bill Burr, along with Andrew Schultz, and a bunch of other top shelf American comedians, went over to Riyadh for the Riyadh Comedy Festival. Now, if that sounds like an Orwellian contradiction in terms, the Riyadh Comedy Festival sounds sort of like the North Korean Dance Festival, then that's because it is. It's ridiculous. What Riyadh is attempting to do right now, what Mohammed bin Salman is attempting to do is create tourist traps in Saudi Arabia because effectively Saudi has no economy other than oil, right? That is still the massive driver of its economy. He is trying to diversify. He's trying to get into tech. He's trying to get into travel and tourism, all of which is fine and dandy. But let's be very clear. Saudi Arabia is an unbelievably repressive country. It remains today an unbelievably repressive country, except for kind of certain touristy areas that are being opened to Westerners so they can come and spend their money. So, a bunch of comedians who are they're constantly violating the taboo. They are the ones who are so brave. They're so brave when there are no consequences to their bravery, by the way. They're very, very brave when the consequence to their bravery is clapter and money in the United States. Not so brave when they go over to Saudi Arabia and abide by every single rule set by the Saudi government for millions of dollars. So, Dave Chappelle, a faux brave person. He goes to Saudi Arabia and he says, right now in America, they say that if you talk about Charlie Kirk, you'll get canceled. I don't know if that's true, but I'm going to find out. Wow, look at the bravery of that man. He's going over to Saudi Arabia to rip on Charlie Kirk. To make jokes about Charlie Kirk. Look at that bravery. Look at that bravery. Perfectly happy to take the money from the Islamic dictatorship. Perfectly happy to take that cash. And rip on Charlie Kirk in the process. Like, what a brave man. What a truly brave man. According to the New York Times, Chappelle was performing in Riyadh at the same time as a divisive free speech debate was roiling the United States. Chappelle has talked frequently about being canceled after an uproar caused by his jokes mocking trans people, but in Riyadh, he took aim at the recent suspension of Mr. Kimmel. Like other comedians at the event who said they felt muzzled by American political correctness, Mr. Chappelle reveled in making uncouth jokes in Saudi Arabia. Yet he overlooked an 8-year crackdown that has led to many of the country's writers, business people, activists, clerics, and social media influencers being arrested. So he goes there to rip on the United States because Jimmy Kimmel was suspended from the air for 5 minutes. That's where he's putting his ire. What a brave person. What a brave person. And speaking of brave people, Bill Burr, who's out there saying, free Luigi, kill the rich. He's a rich comedian, Bill Burr. Bill Burr, who believes that the systems of the United States are deeply corrupt, so corrupt that he is a man speaking truth to power when he appears on every late-night television shows to the hoots and hollers of a bunch of morons in Manhattan. He went over to Riyadh to pick up a giant check, and then he talked about how he found out that over in Riyadh, you know, it's people just like us because there's a Starbucks over there. Great job, Bill. You really are a warrior for truth. What a brave man is Bill Burr. Truly, truly an incredible person. Here he was.
And like my whole idea of Saudi Arabia is what I've seen like on the news. I literally think I'm going to land, you know, and everybody's going to be screaming, death to America. And they're going to have like machetes and want to like chop my head off, right? Because this is what I've been fed about that part of the world, right? When they first went to set it up over there, the rules on what they had about what you could say and what you couldn't say in Saudi Arabia, the people running the festivals will be like, all right, well, man, that's game, set, match. If this is like all you can talk about and you want some good comedians, like this isn't going to work. And then to their credit, they said, all right, what do we got to do? And they just negotiated it all the way down to like you can talk about anything, you know, other than a couple things, which was basically, you know, religion, don't make fun of the royals. And other than that, it was all, everything was like open. The royals loved the show. Everyone was happy. The people that were doing the festival were thrilled. And yeah, it was just this great positive thing.
Wow. Look, so much bravery. So much bravery. By the way, Chappelle closed his show by telling his audience he feared returning to the United States because, quote, they're going to do something to me, so I can't say what I want to say. And then he said to alert his fans that this had happened, he would use a code phrase, quote, it's got to be something I would never say in practice, so if I actually say it, you'll know never to listen to anything else I say after that. Here's the phrase, I stand with Israel. Wow, look at him speak truth to power in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia like that. Wow, Dave Chappelle, you are what a brave person. What a brave person. And by the way, notice the conspiracism there. That basically if he says, I stand with Israel, it's because he's being forced to say, I stand with Israel. There's some sort of conspiracy that wants to force him to say that. And the West is on a suicidal track. The first victims are going to be Jews at synagogues, but they certainly will not be the last. That is for damn sure. Already coming up, the government shutdown continues, plus the Trump administration makes a strange decision about abortion drugs. First, with the holidays just around the corner, companies are getting ready for their busiest time of year by looking for all sorts of extra help. It's not just retail these days. You'll find businesses searching for people to work at winter festivals, wrap gifts, help with big events, manage deliveries, even step in as personal shoppers. There's a real need for anyone with handy skills, event experience, or special licenses. Those roles aren't always easy to fill when demand spikes like it is right now. Whether you're hiring for one of those roles or any other role, the best way to find the perfect match for your role is on ZipRecruiter. Right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. As a business owner, I can really appreciate how ZipRecruiter's technology quickly matches job postings with qualified candidates, so you're not wasting days sifting through the wrong applications. Plus, you can instantly see how many people in your area are actually qualified for a position, and that helps you make hiring decisions a lot faster. You can even reach out to top candidates directly from their resume database, making the recruitment process smoother and more efficient. Let ZipRecruiter find the right people for your roles, seasonal or otherwise. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within day one. And right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/DailyWire. ZipRecruiter is indeed the smartest way to hire. Also, Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes we're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with purpose. GCU equips you to serve others in ways that promote human flourishing and create a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself to glorify God. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With over 340 academic programs as of September 2024, GCU meets you where you are and provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. There are a lot of terrible institutions of higher education out there. Fortunately, there's also Grand Canyon University. Go check them out today. gcu.edu. That's gcu.edu. Meanwhile, the government shutdown continues apace. A new poll suggests that Americans think that our political divisions cannot be overcome. According to the New York Times Siena poll, 64% of Americans think that America is too politically divided to solve the nation's problems. And 33% said that our political system can still address the nation's problems, which is, not a particularly great sign for where the country is today. If you look at September 2025, 16% still say the economy is the biggest problem facing the country. 13% say polarization. 9% say Republicans, 9% say the state of democracy, only 6% say the Democrats, 4% crime, 3% inequality. Okay, what this means is that the sort of political polarization that has been happening right now, I would assume that this is going to get Democrats out to the polls, which is presumably why Democrats are steering directly into this impression. If they can make people feel as though nothing gets done in Washington, and the reason nothing gets done is because of those terrible, terrible Republicans, they're hoping that a bunch of people will go to the polls in 2026. This presumably is why Schumer and the Democratic Party are now pushing along the most self-defeating, silly shutdown that I've seen in my lifetime. According to the Wall Street Journal, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer ignored a push by liberals to stand up to President Trump and shut the government during a budget shutdown 6 months ago. This time, however, Schumer and the Democratic Party went all in, siding under pressure with the party's ascendant left flank. Leaders say they are determined to show voters a greater willingness to fight on their behalf in a direct challenge to Trump and the Republicans in control of Congress. So, polarization means it sort of takes two to tango. And right now, the Democrats are unilaterally polarizing in many ways. They're basically saying they don't want to do a reasonable thing because if they do a reasonable thing with that dastardly Trump, then something might get done. So instead what they're going to do is they're going to get nothing done and then gaslight everybody into believing that it's Trump who's being an obstructionist. Last month, congressional Democrats, according to the Wall Street Journal, rolled out a strategy of resistance that centered on making the case that expiring health insurance subsidies, unless renewed, would set off a national crisis. If Republicans weren't willing to negotiate on extending the subsidies, Democratic lawmakers would try to force the issue, taking their chances on a shutdown. Schumer began calling prominent Democratic leaders, including California Governor Gavin Newsom, former VP Kamala Harris, and Hillary Clinton, as well as progressive groups and labor union leaders, to ask them to amplify the party's message. And then he deputized others in his caucus to persuade influencers that it was now time to mobilize liberal voters itching to take on the Republican Party. So this, of course, is a cave to the left wing. It also is unclear exactly why they're shutting down the government, because in reality, as we discussed with the vice president just a couple of days ago, Democrats just want a bunch of new spending that is a reversal of some of the cuts that were made in that one big, beautiful bill to subsidization of state Medicare programs and Medicaid programs, some of which is redirected toward emergency care for illegal immigrants. Okay, well, as Senator John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, says, this is a clean continuing resolution they're trying to pass here. This is just a continuation of funding at current status levels. That is not controversial.
My Democrat colleagues have little to work with in this debate, with their own previous statements working against them. And so they've tried to portray the clean, nonpartisan funding bill before us as something other than what it is. But the Teamsters president reminds us of the facts. We are not asking Democrats to swallow a list of new Republican policies or partisan demands. Not in there. We are asking Democrats to do nothing more than pass a clean, nonpartisan bill to fund the government for a few more weeks so that we can get back to bipartisan appropriations work.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is obviously true. And the fact that Thune is such a sort of low-key leader is very good optically here, because he's not saying, listen, fight, fight, fight. evocative language. That's not what he's doing. He's saying, listen, we're passing a clean CR. Speaker Johnson, also, by the way, similarly low-key. Here is Speaker Johnson saying that Democrats who are trying to shut down the government to get some funding for illegal immigrants, among others, they're making a mistake. Yeah, I think the affect of Johnson and Thune here is very helpful.
They say that we're making this up, this illegal aliens receiving taxpayer benefits. It's a talking point, they said. I want to remind you of a couple of key facts. Everybody can remember, I think, back to 2020. In the presidential debate for all the candidates on the Democrat side, you might remember famously they were asked the question, raise your hand, they said on the stage, if you believe that illegal aliens should receive health care paid for by American taxpayers. Every single one of them raised their hand, to great applause in the audience from the Democrats who were there. Those hands included Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They wanted to add, instead of the clean CR that keeps the government open for 7 more weeks to allow us to finish the work, they proposed a wild list of partisan priorities. Among them, they want to return $500 million to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to prop up left-leaning and biased media organizations. We're not doing that. The American people don't want us to do that.
Okay, so, again, he is right about all of that. Meanwhile, Caroline Leavitt over at the White House, she blasted the Democrats over the shutdown.
They know what the right thing to do is. They just lack the courage to do it. But they need to step up and they need to vote for this clean continuing resolution to keep the government open that they voted for as recently as March, that they voted for 13 times previously in the past. So there is zero excuse for them to shut down our government right now, and they know it. And very soon, the American people and their constituents back home in states from New Hampshire to Nevada to Arizona to Florida are going to start feeling the pinch of this Democrat-led shutdown. We have millions of troops who are currently going without pay. We have women, children, and infants who cannot apply for a very important WIC program for that critical food and life assistance. And you also look at air traffic controllers who are now having to work without pay. These are critical consequences, and it's the Democrats' fault. And they have a chance to reverse course, and they should.
Okay, so meanwhile, Democrats continue to make two claims. We're not trying to get illegal immigrants health care, and it's good that we are. I know, it's kind of strange, but they're doing both of those things at the same time. Hilariously, Lawrence Jones over at Fox News confronted Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire about health care for illegals, and she says, no, we don't want that. And he's like, well, it's weird because here I have some tape of every Democrat wanting it.
Actually, I have some tape of your Democratic Party members saying this on the debate stage. So they've all said it. Let's play the clip.
A lot of you have been talking tonight about these government health care plans that you've proposed in one form or another. This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
Senator, that's literally every member of your party, from moderate to more progressive, that have said that in the past. I'm seeing them all on the table.
I beg to disagree with you. I have not said that in the past. In New Hampshire, we do not provide health insurance for illegal immigrants. We have never done that, and you're just wrong.
Okay, so well, I mean, then why are you attempting to literally remove the provisions of federal law that stop that? Seriously, that's what happened in the One Big Beautiful Bill. There was a provision that said we will not give subsidies to programs that go for illegal immigrants and dreamers and people who you've previously sort of labeled as normal asylum recipients, but they actually aren't. And Democrats tried to remove that. Some Democrats are either too stupid or too honest to actually go along with this. Maxine Waters is one of them. So Maxine Waters, what a joy she is. One of the more foolish members of American Congress from California. Here she was, asked about illegal immigrants for health care. She says, we want health care for everybody.
But aren't Democrats demanding health care for illegal aliens?
That's right. Democrats are demanding health care for everybody. We want to save lives. We want to make sure that health care is available to those who would die, but having the help of their government.
Well, I mean, Democrats at some point are going to learn the lesson that they probably should not have people who are above the age of 172 in Congress, the Senate, or the presidency. It works out badly for them. Maxine Waters is 87 years old. She's 87, and I guess that either she's addled or she's honest, or both. one of those things. Meanwhile, I'm old enough to remember when Chuck Schumer said that shutdowns were the policy of idiocy. This is not all that long ago. Here was Chuck Schumer.
What if I persuaded my caucus to say I'm going to shut the government down, I'm going to not pay our bills unless I get my way? It's a politics of idiocy, of confrontation, of paralysis. Shutting down government over a policy difference is self-defeating. We can never hold American workers hostage again. While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse. Therefore, I will vote to keep the government open and not shut it down.
That was you 3 times in the past. Go ahead. What's different this time?
Yeah, that was in March, John, before they had done these horrible things to health care, before they had introduced these rescissions which would allow them to ignore the budget process. And the bottom line is, when I was majority leader, we had 13 times to vote on a budget. Do you know why there was no shutdown? We sat and negotiated with the Republicans every time. They got some things, we got some things.
Well, that's it seems like things have changed, but not really based on policy, just based on political convenience. Schumer's obviously doing this to avoid a primary from AOC in New York. He's afraid she's going to run for Senate. She's not going to run for Senate, by the way. He should stop worrying. She's going to run for president. That's what AOC's actually going to do. Nancy Pelosi, another octogenarian, she was asked if Democrats are doing this basically in order to please the far left. And Nancy Pelosi, who cannot stand AOC and believes she's a pretender to the throne, Nancy Pelosi gets very, very agitated. So agitated that dentures almost come flying out of the mouth.
I saw some Republican members of Congress saying, oh, well, if we have this shutdown, it's because of AOC. Well, if that's the case, my office is open and you are free to walk in and negotiate with me directly.
There was a thought from the Republicans that AOC is directing this, and she said that senators are welcome to go to her office directly. Is she?
Why are you saying such a ridiculous thing?
Why are you saying? She said go to her office directly. Do you think there's any?
She is not directing this. She's wonderful. She's a real team player and the rest of that. You started by saying Republicans saying that she's directing this. She is not. Hakeem Jeffries is. And this takes a lot of experience, a lot of unity from the caucus in terms of the point of view, and that's what this is.
You know. Okay, Nancy, let's be real. Hakeem Jeffries isn't steering anything. Now, when it comes to politics, there are the people who make the waves, and then there are the people who surf the waves. Okay, the people who make the waves are the people who take very strong positions on issues and maintain those positions, and then there are people who sort of surf the waves of public opinion, and they try to navigate the highways and byways of shifting tides and all the rest of this. Hakeem Jeffries is a surfer. AOC is a wave maker. That's just the reality. Okay, and Democrats right now are surfing the waves that are being made by AOC and Zohran Mamdani and all the rest of the radical left Democratic Socialists of America. That is what they are actually doing right now. Pretending that somehow Hakeem Jeffries is a wave maker is a category error. Hakeem Jeffries has never taken a strong position on anything out of principle. That is not his story. It just isn't. Okay, meanwhile, in bad news for the Trump administration, apparently the FDA has now approved an abortion drug. It has approved the generic version of mifepristone, which is a popular abortion drug. It's known as the day after pill. A lot of Republicans are very upset about this. Senator Josh Hawley said, this is shocking. FDA has just approved another chemical abortion drug when the evidence shows chemical abortion drugs are dangerous and even deadly for the mother, and of course 100% lethal to the child. Meanwhile, Lila Rose, our friend over at Live Action, she put out a statement, unacceptable. The FDA just approved another generic of the abortion pill, mifepristone. This drug starves babies and harms mothers. The FDA just said it would do a new serious safety study, so I approve another generic now. Robert Kennedy Jr. must reverse this decision. Ed Whelan, conservative legal expert, has just reminded the FDA, unlike, say, the FCC or FTC, is not structured as a so-called independent agency. The FDA is indisputably part of the executive branch and is under direct control of the president. So, yes, this is a major shock to the system for a lot of Republicans. Again, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is himself not anti-abortion or pro-life, so it shouldn't be no surprise that RFK Jr. is presiding over the ease of receipt of mifepristone. It is still shocking for the Trump administration. And again, it does feel very much, if you're going to play politics with the FDA, if the FDA is going to be the kind of place that puts out scanty evidence on, for example, the link between Tylenol and autism, and treats that as some sort of authoritative guidance, even though it's so vague that you end up having to go to your doctor anyway, and then turns around and greenlights generic mifepristone, yeah, people are going to be somewhat up in arms. They're going to say, well, it seems like if politics is playing a role, then politics ought to play, and if politics isn't playing a role, then you need to explain how. And for pro-lifers, this is certainly not what pro-lifers signed up for under HHS and the FDA. And meanwhile, in foreign policy news, the President of the United States has now determined that the U.S. is in a war with drug cartels. This is apparently a way of the President and the executive branch declaring, essentially, that rules on the authorization of military force are loosened when it comes to engagement with drug cartels. According to the New York Times, President Trump has decided the U.S. is engaged in a formal armed conflict with drug cartels his team has labeled terrorist organizations, and that suspected smugglers for such groups are unlawful combatants, the administration said in a confidential notice to Congress this week. The notice was sent to several congressional committees and obtained by the New York Times. It adds new detail to the administration's thinly articulated legal rationale for why 3 U.S. military strikes the president ordered on boats in the Caribbean Sea last month, killing 17 people aboard them, should be seen as lawful rather than murder. Jeffrey Korn, retired judge advocate general lawyer who is formerly the Army's senior advisor for law of war issues, said drug cartels were not engaged in hostilities, which is usually the standard for armed conflict, because selling a dangerous product is different from an armed attack. And he called it an abuse, but the fact that the Trump administration is saying this is self-defense, the reality is this happened in international waters, the blowing up of these drug cartel boats that are aimed at American shores and are carrying fentanyl, which is killing hundreds of thousands of Americans every single year. That seems well within the purview of a declaration that they are in fact engaged in violent activity against the United States. It'll be interesting to see how this holds up in court, or how far the Trump administration is willing to go in fighting the cartels now that they have made it pretty clear that they are willing to do so. Meanwhile, it's a Friday, so that means it's time to do a little bit of culture. I have been notified by my producers that it is imperative that I review some of Taylor Swift's new album. Apparently, the Life of a Showgirl album is out. Now, I'm not going to do what I did last time, which was basically like a 9-hour review of her last album, which was one continuous drone song. It was terrible. Her latest album, I've only heard snippets and a couple of songs from it. One of them is apparently titled Actually Romantic. And apparently it is about a person named Charlie XCX. So I will admit to complete ignorance when it comes to many of these people. So I did have to ask our friends and sponsors over at Comet, which is a project of Perplexity, who is Charlie XCX? What is the controversy between her and Taylor Swift? And I've been told by our friends at Comet, quote, Charlie XCX is a British pop singer and songwriter known for her edgy, genre-blending music and influential role in modern pop, particularly with her critically acclaimed album Brat in 2024. Oh, yeah, it's when Kamala Harris was calling herself Brat and everything. The controversy between Charlie XCX and Taylor Swift centers around a perceived feud fueled by fan speculations and lyrics in both artists' recent works. The feud speculation ramped up in 2024 when Charlie's song Sympathy is a Knife from her album Brat was rumored to reference Swift and their complicated shared history involving the 1975's band members, with Charlie married to George Daniel and Swift formerly linked to Maddie Healy. Fans noted Charlie XCX's lyrics and social posts that seemed to allude to tensions about their experiences touring together and being compared in the pop landscape. Taylor reignited speculation with her 2025 album, The Life of a Showgirl, releasing the track Actually Romantic. The lyrics seemingly call out Charlie XCX for certain comments, interactions with Swift's ex, and for writing a song expressing negative feelings. Wow. That's amazing. Wow. And I will tell you, I did take a couple of minutes seeing this headline earlier to try to figure out why that name is invalid. I mean, it is not a valid Roman numeral. I know. It really should be. Like XC, right? It's 90, or 99 would be XCIX. But XCX doesn't make any sense. It's not a thing. Anyway, apparently, Taylor Swift is angry at Charlie XCX because she released a song on her Brat album called Sympathy is a Knife. And that was apparently about Taylor Swift, who had briefly dated Maddie Healy, who is the bandmate of Charlie's now husband, George Daniel. So I know it's getting a little bit complicated. It's like a Habsburg Empire family tree at this point. But apparently Taylor Swift dated a person named Maddie Healy, who is the bandmate of a person named George Daniel, who is now married to Charlie XCX. And so Charlie XCX wrote a song supposedly about Taylor Swift called Sympathy is a Knife. And now Swift apparently heard about the speculation, and she has a song called Actually Romantic, in which she basically accuses Charlie XCX of being obsessed with her, so obsessed. Just like everyone is obsessed with Taylor, Tay-Tay. She's so obsessed. Maybe it's actually romantic how obsessed she is. Oh my God, this guy. They're all 17. Can you stop being 17 for like half a second, please? Lady, like you're getting married. Can you get over yourself? I know we're all supposed to be on the Taylor Swift bandwagon. I can't get there, guys. I just can't. She's 35 years old. She's acting like a child. Oh my God, these, what we used to call middle-aged, okay? Like, I understand 35 is now considered the new 15 or something. But 35, like, Taylor Swift is a couple years younger than my wife. My wife's a doctor with 4 kids. Like at a certain point here, grow up. Seriously. But here is a snippet of Actually Romantic, believably immature here. I just want to point out, she can't sing. I know all you... She can't. There are actual talented singers out there who I think are playing, who are punching below their weight class. Beyonce, for example, has pipes, and she's constantly fighting below her weight class. Like, she should be a heavyweight in terms of the kind of stuff she sings, and instead she sings stuff in a limited range, which is silly because she can really belt. I come from an era where it was okay to make fun of Britney Spears for not being able to sing because Christina Aguilera actually could sing. Can anyone sing now? I'm just wondering. Sabrina Carpenter can't really sing either. Like, why do we have all of these stars who apparently have the range of about an octave and a half, maybe, at tops? Her chorus is the same as the bridge. There's nothing there. Okay, but apparently the actual theme of the album is, again, about her terrible, horrible, not so terrible, okay life, I guess, as a showgirl. And she has, the title track is called Life of a Showgirl, and it features Sabrina Carpenter, another person who is wildly overrated. Like, wildly, wildly overrated. And apparently it is a story, a magical story, told from the point of a fan who's waiting by the stage for Kitty, a showgirl who makes her money being pretty and witty. So Kitty comes out and tells the narrator, hey, thank you for the lovely bouquet. You're sweeter than a peach, but you don't know the life of a showgirl, babe, and you're never, ever gonna. And then the showgirl starts talking. So she waited by the stage door, asked the club for more to arrive. She said, I'd sell my soul to have a taste of a magnificent life. It's all mine, but that's not what showgirls get. And so I just don't, okay, here's the thing. There's no conclusion to this song. The lyrics to the song are not nearly as bad as the lyrics to Actually Romantic. There's some moments here that are actually decent, right? For example, she uses a simile that I kind of like. She says that one of the showgirls, I guess, she says, was glowing like the end of a cigarette. That's a good simile. I get it. Okay. But basically what she's doing here is a takeoff on All About Eve, which is the Best Picture winner, I believe, 1951. A truly terrific film about a woman who becomes sort of the aid to a star, specifically so she can take the place of the star. And it's a really spicy and interesting film with Bette Davis. It's a great movie. But the whole thing is about sort of the price of fame. But nothing in here talks about the price of fame. So she sort of says it sucks to be a showgirl. It sucks, but at the same time, pain hidden by the lipstick and lace. But wouldn't have it any other way. So what are you complaining about? And then she sings a song, I guess, with Sabrina Carpenter. So, okay. My review of Taylor Swift's Life of a Showgirl album. I know, not as long or as comprehensive as my prior reviews of Taylor Swift albums, but it sounds like more of the same because I don't think that she has the capacity to do anything but the same thing over and over and over again. Again, my encouragement to Taylor Swift, go back to country music. You're getting married, go back to country music, sing about getting married and having babies, because frankly, I think your country oeuvre was better for you than the pop. Alrighty, folks, coming up, we'll jump into the mailbag for our members. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.